This exhibit is based on research that I did for my senior thesis in the environmental studies major at Yale on connections between the Appalachian Trail and the Shinetsu Trail, which is the first nationally funded long-distance hiking trail in Japan. Now, the Shinetsu Trail is an 80-kilometer long trail that was recently extended to 120 kilometers long in Japan between the Nagano and Niigata prefectures along the Sekida mountain range. And although the Appalachian Trail and the Shinetsu Trail were established in really different time periods, the Appalachian Trail was established in the 1920s and the Shinetsu Trail was founded in 2008. Both of them were founded in times of increasing industrialization, where people's relationships to the environment were changing. So the broader questions I was trying to answer in my research project was how a concept like the long trail circulates through the world and adapts to different existing relationships to the environment. So certainly the AT had an enormous influence on the development of the Shinetsu Trail, but at the same time, Japan has had its own associations of traditional culture with environment that have existed long before the advent of, quote, long trails. And that's very much reflected in the Shinetsu Trail's distinct engagement with the regional history and culture. Through this research project, I got to investigate more Japan's broader long trail movement that's growing out of this combination of elements of the AT and the Shinetsu Trail, and it's introducing new approaches to long trails as well. And I think that the connections between these two trails reflect a lot of the changes and also continuities in the ways that long trails are valued and contribute to our relationships to the environment, and just reveal different purposes and unique aspects to the places that they serve. My concentration under the environmental studies major was environmental humanities, so a lot of my research process involved looking at environmental histories, philosophies, and translation work. And in this case, that was from Japanese to English. The neat aspect of this exhibit was that it allowed me to feature a lot of sources that I was reading, I was translating from, I was looking at from my documentation of through hiking the Shinetsu Trail. I was also looking at a lot of maps and looking at a lot of history books. So it really brought to life a lot of these contexts that I was working with into a more cohesive picture, I think. My advisor for this exhibit was Haruko Nakamura, who is the librarian for Japanese studies at the Yale Library System. I first met her during my first year at Yale when I took a history seminar called Yale and Japan, which was taught by Daniel Botsman. And Haruko helped show our class a lot of different sources from the library, whether that was from manuscripts and archives collections to Beinecke to other places that were really relevant to our class. And so later on, when Professor Botsman became my thesis advisor, he suggested that one of the first things I do was to reach out to Haruko and ask her for advice on gathering sources when I was researching in the fall. And since then, Haruko's been super helpful in suggesting historic documents that I would have not thought to reference, such as a whole series on Japan's national parks. That was one of the first things that came to her mind when I was telling her about my project. And she also understands the sort of international collaboration that a project like this represents, and that the audience of making an exhibit like this extends beyond the Yale community and can reach other communities too, like the Shinetsu Trail Club in Japan. The Shinetsu Trail Club provided so much for me during my research and my hike there that creating an exhibit that shared a lot of the experiences that they gave me felt like a really wonderful way to give back, and Haruko's been such an amazing person to work with to share that sort of collaboration. This whole exhibit curation project has definitely introduced me to a lot of new things, a lot of new people. I had no idea that there's a whole exhibit team at Sterling, and they've been all awesome to get to know and have been super guiding for me. I didn't know that there were research associate professors who I could consult with so much, but that was one of the first things that Haruko suggested to me was to get in touch with Masato Takenouchi, who's a visiting research associate professor in the East Asian Studies Department from the University of Tokyo. His office and Haruko's office are right next to each other in Sterling. They were both people who I talked to a lot, especially at the beginning of this project. Masato actually used to work in an archive center in the Nagano Prefecture in Japan, which is one of the prefectures that the Shinetsu Trail borders on. So he was really familiar with the histories that the Shinetsu Trail is related to in the region, which was a really wonderful connection. Haruko was also able to suggest a lot of other database resources to me that I wouldn't have thought to consult, such as the Asahi Japanese daily newspaper database. And in general, I learned a lot about sources that have been digitized already into databases and to look for sources in databases in multiple languages. That's also really key. That can open up totally new worlds. I was able to do the majority of my research before Yale closed down because I was working on my thesis deadline. So luckily, I had most of my sources with me when COVID hit, and I had stable internet access from where I was based. So I was able to carry on with my research pretty smoothly. There are definitely things that we didn't expect adapting to with COVID, like figuring out how large books were based on the online listings. But there is a lot of data online already about the sources that we were going to be featuring that turned out to be really helpful in figuring out what things might fit together in a physical exhibit, which unfortunately won't happen anymore because of the timeline with COVID. I am really grateful for everyone on the exhibit team to be so willing to continue with an online exhibit. I'm really excited to share with everyone what we've been working on.